speaker is Mr. Denninger, Ron Denninger, the former CEO of MCS Net, a big Chicago area networking and internet company that operated from 87 to 98. MCS Net was proud to offer several firsts in the internet service space, including integral customer specified spam filtering for all customers and the first virtual web server available to the general public. Mr. Denninger's other accomplishments include the design and construction of regional and national IP-based networks and development of electronic conferencing software reaching back to the 1980s. He has been a full-time trader since 1998, author of the Market Ticker, a daily market commentary, and operator of the Ticker Forum, which is an online trading community, both since 07. Mr. Denninger received the 2008 Reed Urban Accuracy and Media Award for grassroots journalism for his coverage of the 2008 market meltdown. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Carl Denninger.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, you know, it's been a rather interesting afternoon so far. Why do we throw tea parties on April 15th? I just got done mailing my taxes. It was a really annoying thing to have to send a check to Tim Geithner, who can't bother to pay his taxes. But do we do this for awareness and a citizen's demand that the Constitution that sets forth limited government at the federal, state, and local levels as the highest law of the land be restored and followed? And that taxation is only appropriate if it comes with actual representation? Of course. That's why we're here, right? But I would like to take the limited time that I have with you today to explore just one small area of abuse that our state and federal governments have served upon us. As you all know, in 2008, our financial system imploded. But while you have heard many claims from everyone from Ben Bernanke on down that nobody could have seen this coming, from all corners of the political sphere, whether they be Democrat or Republican, the fact is that you have been and still are being lied to. Our financial system collapsed as a consequence of willful, intentional, and outrageous fraud. You, your neighbors, towns, and states across this land all were victimized by a handful of very wealthy and powerful people. They wrapped their frauds and schemes in fancy names like CDOs and credit default swaps. But in fact, it was nothing other than a giant Ponzi scheme requiring that you be gullible enough to pay ever higher prices for houses and other kinds of assets. Our government borrowed and spent huge amounts of money after the technology market blew up in 2000 as a means of covering up the rot that had infested our economy and our labor that had been offshored to China, Vietnam, and India. One of those scams was found in Jefferson County, Alabama, not all that far from here. They needed their sewer system replaced. Legitimately, it was leaking. They were robbed outright by a bribery and financial fraud and paid 25 times the actual cost of that replacement, nearly bankrupting the county. Several officials of that county have been jailed. They've either been found or pled guilty. This isn't an allegation anymore, it's now a fact. But not one bank executive involved in that fraud has been indicted. The last time I checked, when you bribe somebody, there are 2 people that committed a crime, not one. Then we have the sad story of Washington Mutual, a bank that collapsed in 2008 and which made loans to many people in this community. There was a committee hearing in the Senate on Tuesday. Over 500 pages of documentation was laid on the witness table. Every second word out of the committee members' mouths was the word fraud. I've never seen anything like this in my years of following politics. Tell me why those executives, many of whom admitted to having had documentation that their company was ripping people off, We're not in orange jumpsuits. What are they doing in $2,000 Armani business suits instead? Today we're told that our markets and our system are on the mend and that the worst is all behind us. We're being lied to again. And political candidates all over the land are refusing to address this. Mr. Tarkanian, senatorial candidate for Nevada and one of the people trying to get rid of Harry Reid, who needs to go, by the way, canceled an interview on my internet radio show. Why? Because all he wanted to talk about was cutting federal spending. He refused to address putting the people who have ripped off the American public in jail. We are supposed to be a nation of laws where everyone lives under the same rules. But today the law only applies to ordinary people like you and I. If you're rich or powerful, you can swindle anybody, including state and local governments. And at worst, you get your hands slapped with a fine that is but a tiny fraction of what you stole. We pay our taxes dutifully every April 15th, but both our Treasury Secretary and Charlie Rangel, who until just days ago was chairman of House Ways and Means, by the way, that's the committee that writes the tax laws and makes you pay. They don't have to pay their taxes. Spending is a problem. Let's not kid ourselves. In fact, the federal government has spent 10% of our gross domestic product for the last 2 years. How many of you knew that? Anyone? 10%, folks. $1.5 trillion a year that we do not have. The reality is that last month alone, the federal government borrowed $333 billion from China. That is 1/3, almost 29%, of all of the goods and services produced and purchased in this country. 1/3. That's right. Private demand, that is your ability to go out and earn a living, spend money, essentially collapsed in 2008. Despite what you were told and are still being told, it got worse in 2009. And last month, 30% was borrowed from the Chinese and handed out to people in a puerile and outrageous attempt to avoid dealing with the truth and coming to you, the American people, and saying, we have a rot in this country in our financial system. People have stolen all of the money, and we need to see some of these people go to jail where they belong. All of this happened for one reason and one reason only. The losses that were generated by these corrupt practices can remain hidden in the annals of Wall Street, and they can make their billions of dollars in bonuses. All of these banks today, ladies and gentlemen, have hundreds of billions of dollars worth of home equity lines that people use to go out and buy boats and cars and enjoy the good life on houses that are not worth as much as their mortgage. The value of those assets on their books is zero. Every one of these institutions right now, if they were to take an honest look at their balance sheets, would be insolvent. All of them. Nobody forces them to actually do this. And in fact, last year, our Congress stuck a gun, almost literally, in the face of the Accounting Standards Board and forced them to change the law so they could continue to lie. How long does this go on before another financial panic comes about? I don't have any idea. But what I do know is this. We cannot bankrupt this country so a handful of people can get rich and everybody else ends up in the poorhouse, dispossessed of everything they own and living under a tree. We have health care reform, insane borrow and spend policies, supposed cap and tax. You think your gas is expensive at $3 a gallon now, just wait. We've seen the stock market go up by 80%. We're claiming that everything is okay. But oil has more than doubled. At the same time, we have more supply in the oil market now than has ever existed in the history of the oil market. Are we playing with a casino or are we investing, ladies and gentlemen? And if it's a casino, are the people that are on the other side of the table dealing off the bottom of the deck? You tell me. this was an accident, or if it was truly unforeseeable, then it would be one thing, but it's not. This has been unlawful behavior, and both the Democrats and the Republicans are responsible. This is not a partisan issue, ladies and gentlemen. George W. Bush was in the White House for 8 years. Now President Obama is. We've had both Republican and Democrat Congresses during that time. It will not get fixed unless changes are made now, and ruin will come. You, your children, your grandchildren, and those that have not yet been born have been looted to pay off and rescue these criminals. These high crimes and misdemeanors have been hidden from the American public, and even when it's brought out in the public eye on C-SPAN, nobody goes to jail. We can no longer, in good conscience, go into voting booths and vote for somebody based upon whether or not they have a D or an R next to their name. We must demand more. We must elect people to Congress and to the State House that are going to put the people who engaged in these disastrous and unlawful acts in prison where they belong. We must claw back the funds that they stole through their various schemes and scams and purge our government of those who pass sham legislation to allegedly protect us that is then wantonly and willfully ignored. In short, ladies and gentlemen, we must rise and demand that we will not vote for any candidate unless the following appears on every piece of campaign literature and in every speech. Stop the looting and start the prosecuting.